We'll start soon. Hi. So I'm here with playwright and performance artist Lisa D'Amour, who wrote Airline Highway, the play we're reading. And so I just thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, glad to be here.
So one of the questions, or one of the things we wanted to talk about, is you're one of the few artists I know that does performance art and plays in a play, in a theater.
Mm-hmm.
And which were you kind of more attracted to first, or which started developing, or did they develop at the same time for you as an artist?
Oh, great question, Anne-Liese. For me, they developed at the same time. And I think that doing both kinds of work, it really spoke to my desire to get an idea and make it happen. That was much of it. Because, writing a play, I love sitting down at my desk by myself and dreaming up characters and writing them down. But I have a very, I like to get things done. I like to see performances happen quickly. And so I was really drawn to getting an idea about how I might want to do a play, say in a park that I loved, and then getting my friends together and figuring out how we would make that happen. And so from a very young age, I was doing both things. And I think when you start making theater with other people and say, like, I want to make a play because I love this tree, it doesn't necessarily mean that the character is going to come first. And you may decide, like, the best way to tell the story of this tree is to make a dance or have visual art be a part of it. And so it opens up your mind to other ways of making performance. And so I would say that for the work that I've done that might be considered performance art, or sometimes I call it collaboratively created theater, often that has a very different feel that doesn't feel like a play. It might feel more like an art event with a lot of dance and music. So, but the plays that I write, they both take a little while. They both take a while to make. But the plays that I write, usually it's just me and my computer or my notebook, writing it all down. And then once it's finished, getting actors together to try and read it. And so I can hear if the play is working the way I want it to work.
Oh, cool. So that's part of your process on your own when you develop work.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes I know you just write a play because you just wrote a play, like you had this idea and you wrote a play. And then sometimes you've been commissioned to write a play. How does that, did you already, for example, for Airline Highway, that was Steppenwolf in Chicago, right? That commissioned.
Yes.
Did you already have the idea for the play that you pitched to them, or did they just say, Lisa D'Amour, write us a play? How did that work?
In this case, they just said, Lisa D'Amour, write us a play. Okay. And I didn't have the idea ahead of time, but they were interested in me because in this case, Steppenwolf had already produced one of my plays. So they knew they liked what I did. And so they commissioned me to write another one. And what I knew was that this theater, they have a really large ensemble of actors that work with them all the time. And I thought, ooh, I want to write a play that has a lot of characters in it, that has a big ensemble. And, this was post-Katrina, and New Orleans was really dealing with a lot of gentrification, often outsiders, often white people with a lot of money coming in and buying up property and making it too expensive for people to stay and live in their neighborhoods. And so I was very concerned with how New Orleans was changing, and I wanted to see if I could explore that in a play. I grew up in New Orleans, and I also really wanted to, New Orleans, if you've been there, has its own, time passes differently in New Orleans. People interact differently, and I wanted to try and get a feeling of, like, what does a day in the life of New Orleans feel like? So those were two things that were on my mind when I started writing the play.
Oh, wow. And how long did it take you?
Oh, that's always such a hard question to answer, because there's writing the first draft and then there's revising it over time. So I want to say that the first draft took me, and I was writing other things at the time, but maybe 3 to 5 months, perhaps, while I was working on other things. And then I went out to Chicago, and Steppenwolf brought in a bunch of their actors, and we sat around a table and we read the play, which was very tricky in the first draft because there's so much overlapping dialogue.
Yes.
And so I listened to it. I talked to the director I was going to be working with. I talked to a dramaturg, which is, you might think of as like a play doctor, someone that helps you think through what's next. And then I went away and I wrote the next draft. And I want to say we did that 2 or 3 times over the course of a year until they decided, okay, this is good enough. This is ready enough. We're going to say this is going to happen in December, but you need to keep working on it. And then I would keep working on it. And then when you're in rehearsals, when it's going to be premiering in 4 weeks, you're still rewriting it. So it's really a long process to get it done.
The actors that you worked with at Steppenwolf, was it a different cast for when the move was made to bring Airline Highway to Broadway at the Manhattan Theater Club?
Some of the actors were the same actors, and a few of them were recast.
And how did the actors, when you started seeing some of the actors, did that change did you make changes based on them or no? I'm curious.
Small changes, nothing that like radically changed the play. But yes, it is true that sometimes you realize that like an actor has certain strengths that you want to bring out, or certain weaknesses that you need to kind of change because they're never going to be able to handle that moment. So it's nothing against them. It's just their acting style, you know?
Yes. So it is unusual to have a play written for so many characters. I think because of the expense, right? The money of doing.
Yes. And interestingly enough, you know, another play that I wrote, which is called Detroit, which the cast is 5 actors, which are usually cast as all white. You can vary it if you want. And also it's a strange comedy, but it is a comedy. That play has gotten so many more productions than Airline Highway, and it is simply because of the cast size is one of the reasons. The cast size, and also Airline Highway is very diverse in age and in race. So interestingly enough, there's been more productions of Airline Highway in colleges than anywhere else, because in colleges, you want to be able to have a large cast play.
Right. But they have that challenge of playing some of those older characters. That's really hard for a young person to pull off. When I know, like, your dialogue really is so specific. Do you, I mean, I can't help but ask, is it just in your head, or is it from watching people? How do you
I think it's all of that, Anne-Liese. It's really, I do think that if you're going to become a playwright, I think eavesdropping is really important. Long walks, back when we can gather, you know, go to the coffee shop and just listen. Go to the grocery store and just listen. And, you know, like, think about the rhythms of the way people are speaking. Think about what people aren't saying. Another important thing. And it can be really great and just delightful to write down all of the unusual ways that people express themselves. And, you know, I was drawn to that as a very young girl, before I even knew that I wanted to be a playwright. I come from a large Southern family. And I can remember when I was like 10 at big family gatherings, like just pressing the tape player and putting it under the table and recording what everyone was saying, because they were all talking over each other and the whole thing.
Wow.
So I do think that listening is a really important part of learning to become a playwright.
And yes, and that's where that no one in real life in a big event, they don't just politely wait. They talk over each other.
No. Yeah. I'm sure many of the people in your class have experienced that.
Yeah, at their own home. So I wanted to ask about Airline Highway. What was it like, the move? So you've worked in again, you know, site-specific work and museums, and then out in the open, and then with your plays, you've worked in just about every kind of theater that I've been teaching my classes, in terms of regional theaters, important regional theaters, Off-Broadway, Broadway, and then West End in England, London. But for Airline Highway, as you made the move from a regional theater in Chicago to Broadway, how was that? And like, what were some of the changes that needed to be made to fit in a Broadway model?
That's great, because the thing that was, well, there were two things that were very different. One is, Airline Highway, Act Two, it all happens at a party. And the audience at Steppenwolf has been coming to see many of these actors for many, many years. They've seen them in many different plays. It's quite an event to go see a play at Steppenwolf. And so I felt like the audience at Steppenwolf was like primed and ready for the party. That created a certain kind of energy. In New York, the Broadway theater that I worked in, it's actually connected to an off-Broadway theater called Manhattan Theater Club. And they do have some regular audience members that come see all their plays. But then there can be anything. There can be regular ticket buyers from other countries. So you almost have to focus the story a little more to like teach them where to look almost. And the other thing is the Steppenwolf space. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was very open. I don't know, Anne-Liese, if you talked about the proscenium arch that some theaters have. So Steppenwolf doesn't have that. It's a long, wide stage. The audience, it doesn't quite wrap around it, but it feels that way. So it feels very open, and you really felt like you were outside in a parking lot.
Oh, wow.
In the Broadway stage, it's a much more formal space with this proscenium arch. It actually cut off a little bit of the edges of the set, so we had to kind of restage some things. And I talked to many people who saw both productions, and some really liked the New York version, but it felt different. It was more about the story and following the different characters than experiencing this party. So it was an interesting and challenging process to move it.
And you had a different director too, right? A new director.
Oh, it was the same director.
Yeah.
It was the same director, yeah.
Oh, okay, yes. The set design, something I noticed because I got to see backstage, was it blew me away that the set designer even filled out the design for what only the actors would see. And not just like the audience, because they had different motel rooms. And then I was just so blown away by that kind of investment, so that the actors when they're backstage are still in their like space, and the audience never sees that. I don't think that's typical, because but maybe.
Well, some of that was Scott Pask is a very meticulous designer. I think he was really thinking about sight lines of what audience, especially at Steppenwolf, you could sometimes see inside the room. So he wanted to take care of every detail. He may also have collaborated with the actors to try and figure out what was going to be in there, so they felt really connected to it. So yeah, he was. I can remember at Steppenwolf, we were like towards the end, and he came into rehearsal. There's something called a preview process where the audience is coming to the shows, but critics can't come yet. So we're in that process, and you're still rehearsing in the afternoon, and Scott walked into the room and he had this bag, and I was like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, I just picked up some trash on my way from my hotel room because I felt like we needed some more trash on stage." And he went up and started gluing these different pieces of trash.
Oh, I love it. And then you even made yourself, they had that huge board, I remember this, to honor Miss Ruby.
Yes, I helped make that. I did.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I would say more unusual, right, for that, but that was really lovely.
Yeah, the director really understood that I knew a lot about the texture of New York. I was also very instrumental in helping pick the songs that were played.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you got this up, like, this is a huge thing. Like, I'm a Broadway playwright. How was that for you, and the aftermath and all that, like dealing with that kind of art yourself?
I mean, I'm of two minds on Anne-Liese. It was an amazing experience. It was an amazing experience to be able to give so many actors. There were a lot of first-time Broadway actors in my play. I loved that. There are very few women that are produced on Broadway, and I felt very proud of that. I also, as you said, I do plays, I do performance art, I do collaborative art.
Mm-hmm.
Broadway is about the money.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what sells. And that is not really who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, it's very hard. You, as a playwright, you want the success, but I was like, Lisa, you don't want to get caught up in this value system where the only reason you're doing these plays are for the money, because that is not going to feed your soul.
Right.
So I was always in dialogue with myself, and I'll send you a link on Lise, the article that was written about me when Airline was premiering, which was such an in the New York Times. That was more exciting to me actually than being let's have a whole article in the New York Times about my work. And they talked both about Airline Highway, but also a play that I was doing in small towns throughout America called Milton.
Milton, awesome.
So they really kind of showed. So I'll send you the link, and the students can read it, and that because that really gives you a snapshot of both of the kinds of theater I do, and also my brother. There's a picture of me and my brother in the article, and my brother was in the Broadway production, but also starred in the New Orleans production of Airline Highway.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. And you brought up something really important, that not a lot of women playwrights are produced on Broadway. Mm-hmm. And we do fast and furious history of theater as well. And it's true, those women playwright names don't show up for a very long time. And then you have a smattering. Lillian Hellman, Lorraine Hansberry dies. Lillian Hellman, blacklisted. And when you and I were young studying theater, not a whole lot of women playwrights out there, and that's certainly changed now, but there still is a lot of room to grow. So I was hoping you could speak to that a little bit more, because this is what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we're experiencing our evolution, and I think we're experiencing all if we're talking about America, if we're talking about the United States, we're talking about the evolution of our ideas around who gets to express themselves. Mm-hmm. I think around the time that Lillian Hellman was writing, I don't think most women had any time to even imagine themselves as a playwright. Mm-hmm. But what had been imagined for them was you belong in the home, mm-hmm. which is a beautiful place to be. Raising a family is a beautiful thing to do. Mm-hmm. But you can do lots of other things while you are raising a family, or you can choose that raising a family is not for you. Mm-hmm. But it took a long, long time, I think, for women to go like, oh, I have a voice, I can write, I can express myself in this way. And then an even longer time for the world of theater, which was controlled by men for many, many, many years, to let those women in, to literally let them through the door. So some of what we're experiencing is just time passing and women fighting to express themselves. There are also amazing leaders like Paula Vogel, Susan Laurie Parks, Beth Henley from the South, so Wendy Wasserstein, Adrienne Kennedy, all of these women who, really fought to get their work out there and who paved the way for the rest of us.
Wow. So you feel more like you're part of the kind of outcome of some of that.
Oh, definitely. I can remember, I started writing plays in the early 90s. And I can remember just thinking, like, every theater that I looked at, they would produce one play by a woman a year, and all the other plays were by men. And I was like, well, that's what we're all competing for, the same slot, Mm-hmm. And that really began to change as I continued to write. And I will say that the next thing that happened is they started producing more white women. Mm-hmm. And you still didn't see as many people of color getting produced. And then it really, in the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years, depending on what theater you're looking at, there's been a real explosion of diversity and who gets produced. And I was saying, Anne-Liese, that some of this, especially in the last 5 years, is connected to what the amazing things that are happening on television right now. So because there's all these streaming services who can produce more kinds of TV, and who are looking for all sorts of audiences. They're not just looking for a white audience. You're seeing TV shows, you know, with Asian Americans at the core, with Black people at the core, telling stories in lots of different ways, you know, so many different ways. And that is opening people's eyes. It's allowing lots of different people to see into lots of different stories. And you're seeing that in TV and in theater, and it's really, really exciting. Again, it's part of the evolution and revolution. So.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
uh, so I wanted to ask about like the job. So that means like a lot of playwrights also write for film and television. There's a lot of crossover.
Yes.
Is that something you do as well to support yourself?
I am not writing for TV or film to support myself right now. I am trying to dream up some TV shows that I might be able to work on later. And there's more playwrights in the early part of my career. You really, when TV shows were just on the 3 main networks, you really had to go move to LA and kind of stay there forever and give up your playwriting career. That is not true anymore, because again, there are shows that are running like 6-episode seasons or 10-episode seasons. And so playwrights are able to kind of go to LA, or there's shows that write in New York. You can go there for a shorter period of time and then continue your playwriting work. So I haven't really broken into that. I think it's because I do plays and performance art, and I teach, which is another big part of my playwriting practice. But I have a lot of friends who are writing in both film and TV.
Oh, wow. And then having a literary agent, I suppose there are different ones for film, TV, different ones for theater. And can you talk about the relationship between a literary agent and you, the writer?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I've had 2 agents over the course of my career, and I've had different relationships with both of them. And I will say that for most of my early career, I did not have an agent, and it really didn't matter. I think it's young writers are always very stressed out about trying to get an agent right away, and really you are your own best advocate, you and the connections that you make. You know, agents can help you sit down and think about where you want to get your plays produced and help you get those plays to the theaters, so they can be a shortcut. And then when it's time to when they say, yes, we want to produce it, they help write up the contract so that your play is protected and so that you're getting paid what you need to be paid. And then they get a percentage of what the contract is. That's how they make their money. So, you know, I want to say that earlier in my career, my agent was much more instrumental in helping me think through like what I wanted to do next with my career. Now that I'm a little more established, the agent is more about contracts, to be honest. But really, even the agent that I felt was a little bit more like a counselor, that agent may have gotten me 1 or 2 jobs, but really all the work that I made or got produced was about contacts I had developed. So I really think that if you're someone who's wanting to start writing plays, you know, the most important thing is to really figure out like, what is it that is most interesting to you? That may be a topic that you know deeply. And how do you want to write that? How do you want to express it? And then don't wait. Don't spend a lot of money sending it to a bunch of random theaters. Get your friends together and either do a reading or just do the play with like very little budget and video it and put it on YouTube and send that to the theater. You know what I mean? Like there are so many ways to be active and to have all of this in your own power. And I think that in terms of building a career, you know, you may want to be a playwright and you may be like, wow, I just discovered the plays of Suzan-Lori Parks. And that's like, I want to be like her. You may want to look and say, well, what theaters have produced her plays? And have a list of like, here's my goal, that someday I want to be at these theaters. You may want to email Suzan-Lori Parks and be like, my name is so-and-so. I love your work. You know, what should I do? she may email you back, she may not, but you're never going to know unless you email her, you know? And so who are the directors that have worked with her? Who are the younger directors who have worked with those directors? You know what I mean? So it's really about like looking at who you admire and maybe even asking them for help. They're not that far away. But then also like, who are the people that are making theater in your town? Are there people who are making theater in your town? How do you connect with them and see what they want to make, if you can make things with them, and what connections they have? It's very much about your own connections.
Oh, thank you. And that was exactly where I wanted to go. Like, what would you advise for someone wanting to maybe pursue this? So thank you. Lisa, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of
And
course. And if there are follow-up questions, please let me know and I will send you the link to that article.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I did post for them the New Yorker with Airline Highway with the cartoon.
Oh yeah, a friend of mine drew those cartoons. Yeah.
That was amazing. That would make me. You had one of you too, sitting in the.
Oh right, that was true. That's true. There was one of me.
That was great.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Anne-Liese.
Yes, I'll stop recording now. So thank you, and then we'll just chat. How do I do this? Stop recording.